Grab your cup of coffee. Sit down for a story. Let's all go exploring. Making it after 40. Making it after 40. Making it after 40.
Hello, friends. Welcome back to the Making It After 40 podcast. I am your host, Lisa Rodriguez. I am an actor and writer who is still trying to make it after the age of 40. On this show, we explore what it means to be an artist trying to make it as a middle-aged person. This week, my guest is fiction novelist Deborah Willis. Deborah has a new book called Girlfriend on Mars, which is available for pre-order and expected to be released on June 13th. This was my first time meeting Deborah, and I fell in love right away. Deborah has a 2-year-old, so we talk parenting, navigating careers when both parents are artists, juggling jobs, and how a good editor can really help shape your voice. Deborah is incredibly lovely, and I can't wait to read her book. One minor note, my family was home while I recorded this episode, so you may hear some background thumps from time to time from my 4-year-old playing on a skateboard in the living room, so please forgive me. I did my best to edit those out. All right, with that, let's get into the episode with me and Deborah chatting about her book and our lives. And I start talking, and then I realize oh wait, I haven't started recording and we're already getting into some good and interesting things. And I haven't even introduced you. So yes, so today my listener is Deborah Willis. Deborah is an author. She has a new novel coming out and we'll get into that for sure. But we've already jumped into it and we're talking about kids and emotions.
Yeah, I was just actually saying, conveying the story about my daughter being just devastated last night because she couldn't play with the neighbor's stuffed dog anymore. Mm-hmm. And how it was so hard to sort of be with that huge emotion it went on for so long. Yeah. And then it occurred to me, her disappointment, we couldn't do anything about it. We weren't going to go get that dog from the neighbor's house.
No,
there's no solving this problem for your child. It's just I know this is disappointing. Isn't it disappointing? That's all you can do is just be there in that sadness. And then I realized I had been thinking about my novel in a similar way. When you write a book and then you finish it, you 100% finish it, you send in those proofs. And then 2 months later, you wake up in the middle of the night thinking, oh, I just had this great idea. I could change this one line and it would be so meaningful to me. I just want to make this one little change. And I've had a few moments of that where I'm okay, do what you would tell your child to do. You just have to admit this can be disappointing. And there's other things in life that are going to be wonderful associated with it, it was an interesting parallel for me yesterday.
I do feel like the experience of parenting, if you kind of approach it with a certain mindset, you can do so much reparenting for yourself. And then also just learning, you learn so much through watching your kids and seeing the things that they go through. And, for myself, over the last few years, I've been doing a lot of inner child work and a lot of reparenting for myself. And so it's interesting then to see my kids go through certain things. And I feel because I've been doing some of that work, I'm okay, now I can have the tools to help them.
Yeah. It's really powerful because it's hard to be to not want to fix everything for your kids or make their they are just expressing things that are so beyond anything that, I think we could really understand. For me, as someone who's kind of historically sort of been a bit dissociated from my feelings, now suddenly living with someone who's just feeling everything. Yeah, you really have to learn a new pattern for yourself.
Yeah.
And it's kind of healing. It's great.
It is. It's very healing. It really helps you to kind of look back on certain moments in life and see it from a different perspective. And I think that I've definitely been processing things from my childhood now that I'm oh wow, yeah, I never processed that in a certain way, or I buried that. I'm that really, I was sharing an experience with my son the other day. And I was like, yeah, this happened. And I started crying again. And he was like, oh, Mom. And it was like, so just the long and the short of it is when I had my 8th grade promotion, they give you like a little promotion certificate. And I got my promotion. I, walked up on the stage, sat down, and I opened it up. And there was a piece of paper that said like, you don't get your certificate because you have library fines or something. And I was like, I had no idea. And I just like remember sitting there like tears welling up and trying not to cry in front of everybody. And so then after the ceremony, I walked up to my parents and I start crying. They're like, what's going on? And I explained it. My dad just like marched over and like talked to the principal or the vice principal. I can't remember who. It was like, this is not right. You shouldn't have done this to my daughter. She had no idea.
Yeah.
Like nobody told us in advance. We would have paid them in advance if we had known. And like, when I started talking about it, I just started crying again.
You probably thought your whole life was ruined. You were probably like, oh my God, I don't have to stay in grade 8 now.
Yeah. And I just felt like, am I a bad, like the first thing was like, I'm not a bad kid.
Oh.
I don't do bad things. Oh man. It was just, but it's funny how those moments like really stick with you and can like really like shape you. Oh, I don't know.
It's definitely, I have had, I mean, I was lucky to kind of have this understanding, find a therapist who really I clicked with, and to really understand like these early years, even the parts that you don't remember when you're too young to consciously remember, like those stay inside your body forever. And like, I think that was such a good fortune for me as a parent. And I don't, like, it doesn't feel like fear-based. Like, I guess sometimes I'm like, oh, I really like, maybe I'm too soft because I don't want to like traumatize my child. But I also really understand like she is so in tune emotionally. Like if I mess up, I'll get frustrated or angry or whatever. Yeah. And then later I can talk to her about it. And she's like, yeah, you did get frustrated. And, and I'll say, I'm sorry that I expressed myself that way. And it's like.
Yeah. I think that's the most important thing is that when you have, because we're all going to have those moments. And I think, I've said this before in the podcast, is like, no matter like how great of parents we are, we're all going to do something that's going to mess up our kid. Like there's always, we can never be perfect, and that's okay because that's part of the experience. And then they can like learn and grow, and each generation we try to do a little better. But I think the most important thing is that when we do mess up and we have that moment where we get frustrated or we yell or we're snippy or whatever, that we then go back to the kid and say like, hey, that wasn't okay. I shouldn't have taken my anger out on you, or I should have been more patient. I was frustrated, whatever it is. And just letting them know like, hey, this is what you saw me processing, and that wasn't fair. And I might get mad, but I still love you.
Yeah, it's so powerful. It's like, I find too, like sometimes I think, so I, grew up in the 80s, and I don't think it was like super welcoming for like kids to be like, you weren't like, there was a lot of kind of don't cry attitude in around, I think, and I mean, for my mom, that was even more so. My mom grew up in the 40s, like very much like you don't express yourself. And then of course, like I think I inherited a little bit of that, it goes through these generations. I think it kind of comes through us all. And I think about how like in a way it was kind of great for me because I did have to find a way to like know my own thoughts and to know my own emotions. And the way I found was through writing. So I was really fortunate. Like on the one hand, I wasn't encouraged to express big emotions. So maybe that could have been improved. But I was encouraged to read and to write and to be creative. And I was given so many opportunities. My parents really like, they were hugely supportive of me as a writer. So like I kind of found my creativity through that, which is kind of interesting when we're talking about like, don't traumatize your kids, but they do need challenges for sure.
Yeah. And the thing is like, they're also going to run into their own challenges. Like, so this happened just recently with my 4-year-old. She had this Rapunzel doll that she had gotten from it was her brother's when he was little. And then we didn't get it out of the house before she found it. Because so my son is 13 and my daughter is 4, and so like he like did a big purge, and I put everything in a bag, and I was like, okay, I got to get these off to Goodwill or whatever. Well, she found the bag, so now she has all of his dolls too. So this Rapunzel doll she just loved, and it became her like precious doll. The leg broke off, but she kept it and kept it and kept it, and then the dress started to get tattered and the hair is all matted. And so one day she came and she's like, I have to throw this doll away. And I was like, are you sure? No, you shouldn't do that. I don't think you'll do that. And she put it in the trash, and I took it out and I saved it because I was like, she's going to want it back. And I gave it back to her. I was like, hey, I did save your Rapunzel doll, because she was asking about it. And she was like, okay. So she played with it for like another, I don't know, let's say a month or a few weeks. And then she threw it in the trash again. I was like, are you sure? Because once it goes in the trash, you can't have it. It goes away. She's like, yeah, Mom, it's trash. It's broken. I need a new Rapunzel doll. And we got her a new Rapunzel doll. Well, just like a month ago, this is like 2 months later, she starts asking for her Rapunzel doll. And I reminded her that she put it in the trash. And we went around in circles about where is it, why, but I want it, etc. And then finally I said, well, you know how the garbage truck comes every week and it picks up all our trash and it takes it away. It takes it away to this place called the dump, and it's gone forever. And she lost it. And so this was like something where I tried to keep her from traumatizing herself, but she did it to herself. Now, I don't know if this is the best parenting move, but I went on eBay and I found it. I found the same doll. And she's getting it for her birthday in a couple weeks.
That's so sweet.
I was like 2010 Rapunzel doll, and I found it.
Oh my God, that's amazing.
But like she made up this whole story about how there's going to be another little girl who's going to find it in the dump and play with it. And I hope that little girl will bring it back to me, because she has to know that I still want my doll. But it was heartbreaking. She was just completely shattered, broken to pieces over losing the doll. So they have to go through their own stuff, like we try to protect them as much as we can, but the reality is like they might end up creating their own trauma.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I don't really worry about, there's that kind of old idea of like you have to prepare them for the world, like get them to struggle at home so then they're ready. But I also just feel like the world is hard. Like we are blanketed in wildfire smoke here in Alberta right now. And
oh no.
Yeah, so the whole week has been these conversations with my little girl saying outside park. Outside park, and me saying we can't go outside, the air isn't good. And like today at it's so heartbreaking to hear her talk about this kind of grown-up problem. She was sitting at the lunch table going, bad air outside. And oh God, I was just thinking, like there, we don't need to help them suffer. There's going to be enough suffering.
Yeah. That's very true.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about your writing. You were just saying that your parents have been very supportive of your writing, and they encourage creativity. And so have you been writing like your entire life?
Yeah, actually, I think when I decided to be a writer, I was probably about 11. And, I had this writing teacher who the first day of our class said, all of you are here because when you were little kids, you wrote a little poem and you showed it to your mom and your dad, and they said, good job. And his like implication was kind of like you became a little bit addicted to this praise and the sense of self that you got from that. And I guess part of that is true. Like I actually have really clear memory of writing all these poems, just having this like spurt of inspiration as an 11-year-old and writing poems like from the perspective of a shoe and all these things, and showing them to my dad, who had wanted to be a poet himself. And he read them, and he didn't, he doesn't tend to like overpraise, but he kind of looked at me and he said, I wonder if you'll be the writer in the family. Because it sort of felt like there had been like attempts, like an uncle who tried, and my dad had wanted to be a writer. My aunt is an editor. And so it was kind of an interesting moment that was very memorable to me. And I guess I'm an introvert. I always loved to read. And maybe it just seemed possible to me also having an editor as an aunt. Like she would talk about writers like they were just people. And
Yeah.
and then I was really lucky too, because I went to university in Victoria and I had great writing teachers, which again made it seem like this is a thing that like real people do. It's not
it's not far-fetched or like untouchable. I think that's so important to have examples or, you know, people in your life who can show you that it is possible, and it's just, you know, they're just normal people like you and me. It's just that they did the thing that they wanted to do, and they just went out and did it.
Yeah, it seemed like very possible to me when I started as like a 19-year-old at university, started writing, because I was surrounded by these people who published books. It seemed to me like, of course I'm going to publish a book. I mean, I had a lot of unearned confidence too. I don't know where that came from. I was super determined. Like I didn't really think there was much other option for me. Maybe I didn't have anything else that I really wanted to do.
So what has that journey been like from university to now with your writing? Like, was it just like instant success, or did you have to like overcome a few things, or just find your writing voice, or
it was kind
of, find someone who believed in you?
Yeah, probably that last one was the most important thing for me. What was really interesting was that same writing teacher who kind of teased us about we're all here because we were poets as kids. He also, on that first day, there was a class, it was probably about 40 people, and he said, I think it was only one or two, or maybe it was 2 or 3 of you are actually going to make it. You're actually going to be writers. And
sounds like an acting class.
And like, it was so interesting because, like, speaking of that unearned confidence, I remember just looking around the room and thinking, well, who are the other 2 going to be? And I kind of had this idea that I got from an essay by Earl Burney, where he wrote when he was like 90 years old or something. He wrote, like, my strategy has been to outlive the other writers. So I just keep going. Like, I just keep writing. And I kind of felt like that was true. Like, really the hardest part is making the time, finding the time when there's so much else going on. You've got to have a job, and people have kids, and caring for parents, and like so much just kind of sort of takes people out, you know? So I really kind of built my life around it as after university. And I really wanted to prove to myself, a lot of my fellow students went off to do MFAs in writing. It's a really common journey. And I felt really sort of frightened of that, because I thought, if I stay in school, how am I going to learn to be a writer without that structure? So I worked in a bookstore, and that was really nice. Like, having a job, go to the job, come home, and you're totally free to spend your time as you like. Yeah. And then I was published actually a lot earlier than I thought I would be. Same writing teacher also said,
that's awesome.
He obviously had a big influence on me. This writing professor, he was a poet. He's passed away now. His name was Patrick Lane. And another thing that he said was, every writer has a 15-year apprenticeship. And so I loved that idea. Like, I was like, there's no rush. I can take a lot of time to learn, to read, to just sort of figure out my material and my voice. And so I did the math, and I was like, okay, so I guess I could maybe publish a book if I have an apprenticeship of 15 years. That would make me 34. And then maybe I'd have a book ready by like 37. And what ended up happening was I wrote and published a few short stories in some smaller magazines. And then I was very lucky that my boss at the bookstore, who was a real short story lover, he had actually been married to Alice Munro. He was her first husband. So he read my stories and he loved them. And he started showing them to everybody. And he was just really enthusiastic. And he was probably like 80 years old at the time. And I kept thinking, like, I think he has like some kind of dementia. Like, he seems to think I'm going to get published. Like, I'm going to get a book out. And then that's exactly what happened. Like, he really did. Like these stories somehow got hand to hand, and then ended up with an editor. And she happened to be like really the right reader for my work. And
Yeah.
so at 27, I published my first book with her.
That's so awesome.
Yeah. It was really like, it's pretty astonishing just telling the story now. I'm like amazed.
Yeah.
by the
Yeah, it really is interesting how like just being sometimes it's a matter of like right place, right time, meeting the right people. But I also feel like you can't be in those right places, right times if you're not open to those opportunities. If you're kind of like open and just, being friendly with your boss and sharing a little bit of your life, sharing a little bit of your writing, then that opened you up to this opportunity,
and like doing the work and like taking the risk, sending my work to magazines, getting rejected, getting accepted, that started it rolling. And then also, I mean, it was really quite terrifying for me because at 26, I signed this book contract. I was super naive. I thought, like, they told me I had a year to finish the book. I had to sort of write this whole second half of the book. So it had taken me something like 5 years to write like 5 stories that I thought were strong enough to publish. And then they wanted 5 more. And
oh, wow.
I didn't know then that writers usually miss their deadlines. Like I signed that contract and I went to bed and then I woke up at 5 a.m. having a panic attack. Like I was just totally overwhelmed. And then it was interesting because I made the time to do it, of course. And once I had the sort of support of an editor who was helpful, like she kind of said to me, your themes seem to be this, which I hadn't thought of before. And then I was really I just sat down and finished that book in a year. And then I sent them my manuscript on the very day that had been listed in my contract. And I remember getting the email back saying, no one has ever done that before.
Wow, you're just getting published at 27, meeting your contract deadlines. I you know what though, I would be the same way. Like for me, deadlines are the deadlines. You have to meet them. You have to figure it out.
Yeah, and you're also you have to do that for your own mental health, in my opinion. If I drag it out, it just makes it so much worse.
Yeah, and then you just have it looming over you oh my God, they're waiting for me. I'm such a disappointment.
Yeah, that's actually how I ended up writing my novel. It actually is that's 100% how I wrote my novel because
Oh, really?
Yeah, so I signed a 2-book deal, meaning they were going to publish my second book, which is a collection of short stories. And then instead of just signing for that book, they said, would you want to write a novel? We would sign you on for... So then you have this sort of guarantee of a 3rd book publication or almost a guarantee if you could, actually produce a novel. And so I did. I thought, I'll write a novel. And I had an idea that I pitched to them and I worked on that idea and then it kind of fell flat. And then I worked on a different novel for close to 3 years and it just it was just such a mess. And then I went on a writing residency in Latvia, which was a really amazing experience. But I showed up and I had about 3.5 weeks at this residency and I had these 400 pages of this chaotic novel that I had been trying to pound into shape for 3 years. And I started reading it and I just thought to myself, if I have to spend 3 weeks working on this, I'm just gonna barf. I can't do it anymore. It's not working. I had to admit it. And then I thought, but I'm 2 years late on this deadline now. And nobody really cares, your agents and your editors, they get it. But I also, that inner voice was saying to me, you have to, don't mess up your life, Yeah. And so I thought, okay, I have to write a novel and I have to write it in the next 3 weeks. And, I was really lucky because I already kind of had an idea. I had a short story that I knew I wanted to expand into a novel. It had been in the back of my mind for the, several years. And I was like, now's the time. And so I looked up online, the minimum length of a novel is 50,000 words. And I thought, okay, I broke it down into days, how many days, I could have to write 4,000 words a day. And then I just dove in and did it. And it was really exhausting, but really exciting. And then I came out with a novel draft, which I then had to revise for, 3 years or something like that. But
and is that this novel that is coming out in June?
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that's so exciting.
Yeah. It's interesting for me to think back on those 3 weeks because they were so like addictive and productive and it was really fun. Like the novel, it was a good combination for me because the novel is satirical and meant to be funny.
Yeah.
It's called Girlfriend on Mars. It's about a couple and the woman in the couple she's applied for a reality show and she wants to star in this reality show. And if she wins the competition, then she'll be one of the first humans sent to Mars. So there was kind of like a lot of like humor in it for me and interesting things to research about Mars. But then there was also, for me, it's really like a climate anxiety book and about our the devastation on this planet. So it was like also a really nice way for me to like harness those anxieties and do something useful with them, or I don't know if it's useful, but do something with them.
But I think it'll be fun for people to read. I was looking at your website and reading the synopsis, and I think it's interesting too because you started it 3 years ago, right? And so now it's coming out now, but it also ties into like so much of what's happening now, like in the last year or two with like the billionaire space race. Like, I don't know that 3 years ago I was totally aware of it. I guess it did kind of start taking off then, but like, especially I feel like lately, with both Bezos and Elon Musk trying to do their little tourist space business. It seems very relevant and like very timely.
Yeah. My dad phoned me like a year ago and he was like, they have to move your novel up. They have to publish it now because Elon Musk is peaking. He's at peak asshole right now. And I was like, I don't know. Like, I don't think we need to worry. I feel like Elon Musk has like peaks of assholeness that he's still going to summit,
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, he definitely, I don't think he's ever going to stop.
No.
I mean, I think like in another 5 years, he will be a full-on supervillain.
Yeah.
So like, this is just his like origin story. He's still building up to that.
So true.
Yeah, I think I was reading the synopsis and it sounds like a lot of fun. It sounds really, it sounds interesting. I like that you do kind of like, I think it's interesting how writers will kind of like put the things that they're worried about or interested in, like, and overlay it into like a fictional story. So it's like, sure, it's about this couple and the girlfriend is going to go to Mars, but at the end of the day, like it's about the environmental anxiety. I had another writer on not too long ago, and she wrote a story that was like based in her experience with losing her dad to AIDS when she was 14 or 13. But the story was about like a pandemic and this teenager dealing with this pandemic. And it was like, not exact, but related. And I feel like novelists get to do that a lot. Whereas like maybe screenwriters are a little bit more on the nose.
Oh yeah. That's interesting. I mean, it kind of maybe is a bit like acting, like, that you have your own store of maybe emotional stuff that you're working through, but you're like coming at it from an angle that's, maybe it's not you, especially fiction writers. Like you feel like you can be more honest about your own inner landscape when you're approaching it through fiction, I think. Yeah.
And I feel like definitely with the fiction, with the novels, like there's so much play you can do. Whereas with this, I don't know, you can have these themes and like because you spend so much time with the novel, getting through it and reading it. At least I'm a slow reader, so I spend a lot of time with my books. But whereas like when you watch a movie or a TV show, especially a movie, you've got 2 hours, maybe 3 hours if it's a long one. But I don't necessarily look for like, oh, this was the subtext. I'm usually just enjoying it. And sometimes I'm like, oh yeah, this is what this actually was about.
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, there's a lot of leeway in a way, like on the screen, you have to like you're showing, not telling all the time. And in a novel, you do have a little bit of, you know, we try not to tell too much, but you do have more of that. You can go really like deep internal with a character, and you can kind of expand on your themes in exposition. And yeah, there's a kind of maybe a bit more flexibility or something sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. It is interesting how the different storytelling arts, how they overlap and how they differ.
Yeah. I helped my friend adapt her novel for screen, and it was really interesting to like take something that it was done, like it's written in a first person monologue, and there's like so much that, you know, he's like telling you, and so then taking that and having to show it visually was a really interesting like challenge.
Yeah. With this story, are you like looking to shop out the rights for like production?
So actually it's quite exciting. It was published as a short story, also called Girlfriend on Mars, in my my second book. And a director and writer named Caitlin Fontana read it. And she, like, we have a mutual friend, so she read the story and she was like, this is really kind of like in my wheelhouse, and bought the rights to the story. And then it's really been like cool for me because the story sort of stayed in my mind. I wrote it. I remember when I wrote it, I thought like, I feel like this could be a novel, but I didn't know how to take it that far at that point. And it was really my favorite story. If I was doing a public event or something, I always wanted to read from that story so I could kind of tell that it was really still alive for me. And then she bought the rights to the story, and she wrote a script that was necessarily quite different from the short story. Just like the demands of a movie where she needed to. Yeah. And I read the script, which I think is brilliant. And I think if it gets produced, it'll be great. But I also had this, like, it was clarifying for me in a sense, because I felt like, no, that's not what happens to my characters. So it was actually helpful to have like her creative take on it, and then to be able to, like, I hadn't even been consciously aware that I had a narrative in my mind unfolding, and that helped me to see my own narrative too. So there is possibly going to be a film produced that will be different from the story, different from the novel. It's kind of a like,
that's super interesting. Like, because I think you often will hear of like writers wanting to like have so much control over their story. So when it does get adapted to a screenplay, sometimes they get upset, like when they take it in a different direction. I think it's really neat that you can say like, okay, that's fine. Like if you're going to take it in that direction, but I know, and like my heart and my mind, this is the real reality for the characters.
Yeah, it's so interesting to me because like it was partly maybe that those characters really did feel so alive to me still. So the fact that they were alive in her mind and they were doing different things, like it almost seemed like normal and natural to me. Like they, I haven't had this about many characters in my life, but like these ones for sure, they just felt like they were like just speaking right to me. So it almost made a kind of intuitive sense to me that like, they're out there in the world, they're doing something else over at Caitlin's house.
And it's funny that that your friend wants to make it a film, because I could also see it being like a series. Like, obviously I haven't read the book, and unfortunately I haven't read your short stories either. Just from the synopsis, I could totally see people expanding it out into like a limited, like it could be like a 10 episode series, you know, and it could be like a few seasons or something. But that's exciting.
I would love that. But we'll see what I mean, I also really want Caitlin's film to move ahead, so that's kind of the priority. But it's I can see it. And I do think because it has a bit of like, it has that kind of reality TV setting, I did actually want it to have a kind of fast cut feeling, like film, like television. I wanted it to kind of like jump from scene to scene. And so I can see it going, like being adapted, but I don't know.
That's cool. That's exciting. Well, let me ask you. So, at the same time that you're birthing this novel, you had your own child, and you're having her a little later than some folks. I know I'm my 4-year-old. I had her like just 2 months before I turned 40.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
After having my first one at 30, so that was
Yeah,
interesting as well.
totally.
But yeah, it was it's exciting. So I'm wondering, how has like becoming a parent maybe affected your creativity or your creative voice, or like what has that experience been for you?
It's been, I mean, really pretty unexpected. So I was 38 when she was born, and I had written the draft of the novel maybe a year and a half previous, and then I had been revising it, and I felt in this real rush. Like I was like, I'm having a baby.
Mm-hmm.
I have to finish this novel before the baby comes. And
Mm-hmm.
so I have a super clear memory of like being at my desk and going through, I had gone through, and this was like my latest revision, and I really felt like I got it now. Like this novel is done, this novel has been for me one of those things where I'm always telling people like, it's done. And then I'd send it to my editors and they'd say, no, like you need to do more work. And I get all kind of angry about it. And then of course just realize that they were right and go back in and do another revision. So this time I was like, this is like for sure it's done. It was July 10th. My daughter was due on the 12th. And I thought, okay, like maybe she'll be a day late and I'll have 3 days to just reread the book, to like make some small changes. I really wanted to have that one last look at it before I sent it to my editors. And I hit save and I closed the laptop, and then I went out for a walk with my friend. And I said to her, like, I feel a little weird. And then, and then I went for dinner with other friends, and I said, I said to my friend, I think I'm in labor. And she was like, you're not in labor. If you were in labor, you would be screaming. And I was like, okay, I don't feel good. And then like got in the car and it ramped up. Anyways, of course, like we called my midwife. She came over. She was like, oh, wow, like you're 7 centimeters. You are in labor.
Holy cow. That's like right at transition.
Yeah. And then,
Ooh.
yeah, then I had to, we went to a birth center, which was kind of like an Airbnb for like giving birth. Like it was not a hospital,
okay,
but it was, so it was a kind of calm environment, but I just like getting in the car and driving there, it really seemed to slow labor. So I had like a good 10 more hours or something, but, I mean, the shorter version of this story is I didn't finish the novel before she was born.
Oh,
and I was like, I just felt kind of so disappointed about it, like it was so close, that kind of feeling. And then when she was about 2 months old, it took 7 weeks for us to really like establish breastfeeding. We had a really rough start that, and extremely exhausting kind of those early weeks. And then, I did the whole like pumping all the time and had to wake her up every 3 hours and that sort of thing. So anyways, at 8 weeks, I was like, okay, we're 1 week into me being able to just like breastfeed my child and then go back to sleep. So life has improved drastically from when I was like pumping and sanitizing and all that stuff. And I was like, there's no time like the present. Like I better look at that novel.
Oh God.
And
give yourself a break.
It was crazy. Like when I think back, but I also think it was true. Like I think it would have been harder to work on it now, actually.
Yeah.
So
yeah,
I reread it and I was like, oh, it wasn't close. It like really needed more work. And I was rushing it because I wanted it so badly to be finished before she was born. And so in a way, like I felt like the timing of her birth, I'm sure she didn't do it on purpose, but like it was just so perfect because it really saved me actually from sending it too early. And
it gave you that break, probably that mental space that you needed to get a little bit of because sometimes you need that. Like I write like I've written a lot of sketch, but I've also written a pilot, and it was in the many, many drafts, like getting a little bit of space from it really kind of helps you realize like, oh no, that's terrible. Why did I write
I
that?
know. I know. You're always so happy, and then you realize like you were totally deluded.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's better to revise something than to have to start from nothing, though. So
that's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So yeah, but it worked out. It was not a simple process. Like I was usually revising in like maybe half an hour a day, and she was usually napping on my chest while I was doing it. But it worked in a way, like it really slowed me down. And there were sometimes, like on the internet, they call it being nap trapped. And I would just be like stuck under my sleeping baby, and I would have nothing to do, no book, no phone. I would just be sitting there, and I would think, okay, like I know there's a problem at the middle point of the book. It slows down. Like I'm just going to think, I'm going to sit here and think about it.
Oh yeah.
So like those moments of the really slowing down, or like really thinking about character motivation, like it's not quite ringing true yet. Why would she feel this? Why would she be acting this way? And so yeah, it was in a way, it was a really great moment creatively. Like I don't think I could have written anything brand new, but to be at that late stage of a project, and to be doing that sort of final revision worked really well for me.
That's neat. It's so funny that you mentioned this, because when we first started talking about, like writing and then having the baby, it reminded me of, there's a TV show. I want to say it's called Modern Love, but I don't think that's it. It's on HBO with William Jackson Harper, and he plays an editor, and then he's like realizes that he has a book in him and he really wants to write it, and so he's with his girlfriend or wife, and they make the plan that he's gonna be the stay-at-home dad because she's pregnant. He's gonna be the stay-at-home dad, and he's gonna get to writing. And so, and of course, like they do this montage of him like caring for the baby and then writing, and then like at the end he's like, and I have my novel and it's successful and I've made a ton of money, and I'm like, yeah, right. You cannot just like sit around. Like, it's not like you have all this free time when you're home with a newborn to just sit and write. I mean, like people can do it, but it's not just like, it doesn't work like that.
And
like the way they portrayed it.
Oh my God, I know TV was really, and movies were so misleading for me about birth, about like parenting, all of it. I was like, I really didn't. I mean, I just did. Yeah, gosh. I didn't understand. I also didn't understand the variation in terms of what kids need. Like one of my friends, it seemed to me like a lot of people were saying to me, and then after a few months, your baby will sleep from 7 p.m. till 7 a.m. And like my child has never done anything even remotely like that. Like she would have to be very ill to sleep that much at night. And so like there was just a totally different. Yeah, it's.
Every kid is so different. But yeah, I think exactly the media portrays parenting in a very different light than the reality of parenting. And yeah, I fell prey to that too with my first. I was like, holy crap, the biggest thing that I realized, like we like came home from they like kicked us out of the hospital. They're like, it was during H1N1,
right? Wow.
The bird flu. And they were like, we need the bed because we have too many people. So you need to go home, or you're going to have to be in the regular wing of the hospital, and you don't want to do that. So go on. And it was like, okay, so now we have to take this being home and we have to care for them. And like, oh wait, we have to wake up every 2 hours and feed them. And like, oh my God, for the rest of my life, I am going to always worry about this person, even when they're not next to me and they're at school and then they're an adult. I'm never not going to worry about this person for the rest of my life. Holy crap, what did I sign up for?
It's true. It's such it was really interesting for me holding on to like my past self as a writer, but also, and like that, I think it was interesting revising a book too, because like you become a different person. I have a friend who's a really beautiful photographer, and she took photos of like the birth, which are very raw and bloody, but she took a picture of me, and I always think of it as like you just captured the moment before like I changed into a completely different person, and it was like my midwife had the baby. I sort of actually birthed the baby in this kind of big bathroom area that they had. And, and then they took the baby and my partner and they went out to the bedroom, and there was like a few minutes where I was sitting alone in this birthing chair, and she took a picture of me, and I still can remember, like I didn't understand yet that I was going to just like love so hard, I was really in this, and I remember thinking too, like it was done, like I had given birth, and, it, no epidural and whatever. And I remember thinking, I did it. I did the hardest thing I'll ever have to do. And, within a few days, I realized like, nope, no, not even close.
That part was almost easy because now it's done. Now you have to like heal your body and take care of this little one.
For sure.
And then eventually you're going to go back to your career and try to find time to fulfill your own needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm like talking as a sort of after 40 podcast, like it does feel kind of like a new beginning for me at around 40. Cause I, now I have a child, my time situation has totally changed. My priorities have changed. I'm just like, and I have a book coming out. So that's kind of also a kind of ending where I'm like, I have to start something new. And I'm not working on anything new right now. And I know that I will. And it's just like a really kind of interesting time where I feel like kind of excited and a little bit lost at the same time, naturally.
Yeah. And how is it? Because your husband is also an artist. He's an actor. So how has that been for the two of you? Like coming into your middle age and having a newborn, and then, well, I mean, she's not a newborn anymore, but having a toddler, but then also like making your creative careers work for you, for both of you?
I think it's been really challenging. Like we've loved it. We have been making a choice, which is maybe unusual. We haven't put her in daycare because she was a pandemic baby. And like the first year she didn't see really almost anyone but us and some really close family. And she just really she was like a slow to warm up kid anyways. And we just didn't feel like she was ready to just be dropped off somewhere. Yeah. So we've kept her home and we like trade off. My partner's a musician and an actor and a writer. And so he, like if he's working in theater and if he has work outside the house, then obviously I'm on deck. And then when he's doing like his own work, if he's doing grant applications or he's just finishing making an album now, he sort of like, he does that in his studio in the basement while I'm with her. And then I do some writing, and I have a day job as an editor too. So I do that work when he's with her. And like, when I say it like that, like, oh, we just split the days, people are like, well, that works well. And I'm like, it does not work well.
It doesn't.
Like, I think we're both very stressed, and yet we're both like, we're lucky because we're on the same page. Like we both really love spending time with her. We're really grateful for this time. And sacrificing some of our work life, but it's
well, and then sacrificing time with each other too.
Definitely.
Right? Because then like, if you guys are both taking care of baby and you have your jobs for money, that keeps the steady income coming in. And then you also have your other creative jobs that like kind of ebb and flow, then you're constantly working. And, like when do you find the time for each other? That's a big challenge. My husband is a structural engineer and he has a full-time job. And then, I'm a property manager for my steady income, right. But then I also have the podcast and then I have auditions. And so like, he has to be on board, and like sometimes I feel bad because it's like he didn't make the choice to live this creative life, right. But he's willing to like take on a little more on the weekends when I need to do these interviews, right. Or I need to edit for like 4 hours or whatever. Right. It's hard. It's really hard.
It is. Yeah. yeah, I mean, maybe that's like one of the central things about life after 40. Because when I was younger, and like I told you, like I worked at a bookstore, and then I came home and I had an apartment to myself, and I did my writing, and so like I held myself accountable, and sometimes I wasn't so good at that, but that was my only real challenge, like like you sacrifice going out with friends or something, but as a like a mid-career artist, I really feel like the challenges pile up. And it was interesting to me a few years ago, we have the Canada Council, which, we're so lucky to have like grants for writers and artists. And they sent out a survey, and they were saying like, basically there were a lot of questions that I felt were kind of leading questions about how to support young artists, and I thought, that's great. Supporting young artists is great, especially artists who are coming from backgrounds where they don't have the kind of privilege that allows them to dedicate time to this. But, when you're a mid-career artist, you probably got parents who are sick and aging, and you may have kids who need a lot of care and time, and, you might have a mortgage, and there's just a lot of like additional challenges in this. And you also don't have the kind of, I think there's a kind of excitement and momentum that surrounds youth. And I know for my partner as a musician, like in the music industry, they consider you old at 28.
Yeah.
So like you have to really forge your own path and maintain your own confidence. And
yeah, absolutely. 'Cause it's just because you're an artist, it doesn't mean that when you get to middle age that you don't have the same like life requirements or life changes that everybody else does. Like the accountant, they might have a little bit more stability, and they have to like take care of their kids and all that, but they do have a W-2 income that's coming in and paying the bills, and then they have time for their hobbies. Whereas like the artist, they don't necessarily have that stability, and hopefully somebody took them aside and said, hey, make sure you put away money for retirement. But I know a lot of people don't end up doing that. And I think there is a lot of need for support for the middle-aged artists, because how do you do it all when you have these new life responsibilities coming in?
And
because like your art is like another child.
And my experience too of like my recent experience of feeling like, oh, my attachment to life has deepened so much after having my daughter. Your experience too is just as valuable as that more youthful viewpoint that might be maybe sort of fresher or whatever. But I feel like the insights that I could maybe have as a writer at this stage are also interesting. So,
well, I think like you just said, there's so much deeper. Like you kind of have a knowing and an understanding. And I know for me, I know myself so much better now than I did when I was in my 20s. And I think there's there's like the wisdom that comes, there's the life experience that deepens everything. And then I think there's also the like, not, I'll just say, give no fucks, like because you know what your priorities are, your decision maker gets more fine-tuned, and it's a lot easier to know like what you want out of life, what you're going to put up with, and where you want your priorities to be.
That's true. Yeah. I mean, let's celebrate it. Just it's nice to be here talking to you about it, like because I don't really think about it so much, my age and this kind of new phase, or it feels a bit like a new phase, but I think it's really positive.
I think it'll be interesting to see what your next piece of writing is going to be. Now that you are in your middle age, and which always feels so weird to say.
I know.
I feel like middle age sounds so old. But I mean, like here we are. We're here to celebrate, 40 and above. Because I think that, like we were just saying, there's so much beauty. There's so much we can all learn. And I don't know if there's a way to get through to the younger folks. I don't know if there was a way to get through to me for sure when I was in my 20s. But there really is just like so much that we can bring to the table, and that I think there's so many of us who are longing to see our own stories out there, whether that's like in a novel or whether it's in media or however.
Yeah, I do actually remember being young, and it felt like anything after 40 was like just a blank to me. I couldn't even fathom what it would be like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what do you look forward to as you continue to age into your career and continue to make art?
Wow, that's such a hard question because I feel so in it. Like I'm so just in the day to day. I look forward to eventually having more space and time for my own work. And I look forward to, I mean, I have a kind of like a bit of an idea in the back of my mind for my next project. And I kind of make notes in like the middle of the night towards it. And so I do have something that I'm passionate about. I have an idea that I'm passionate about. I don't really know how to approach it. And I guess I'm looking forward to like discovering a structure and a voice that might work for these ideas. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah. I think it'll also be neat to see how, like, as your daughter continues to grow, like how that's going to feed the creative voice, and then you get to help shape her creativity and encourage that. That'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah. It's such an interesting like time. I find it sometimes I just feel totally overwhelmed by the future. Like those climate change fears that I was talking about, and just, in some ways, I guess I'm living a lot more in the present moment, which is maybe good.
Yeah.
You know?
I think so.
But yeah, it's also really nice to talk to you and think like, yeah, the future, you can shape that by thinking about it and having some excitement and goals. And
yeah, I think it's important to live in the present, but then I think it's also important to like assume that there will be a future.
That's probably important.
Oh, I mean, we don't have to get too heavy, but it does sometimes feel like what is there gonna be for our children? And like I was talking with my cousin just last night because the US is having so many very conservative and very restrictive legislation being passed in many states, and I feel very fortunate to live in California, and my son is trans, and so I just think like, are we gonna have to flee? But then I'm like, but where do we flee to? Because when I talk to Eric, he says that you guys are like fighting extremism in Canada too, and like I know that England is like having issues. Like I don't know what country to go to. Where can we flee? Because the conservative right extremism is happening everywhere.
It really is. It's really, really scary. I know.
So,
I know.
Yeah.
I mean, I guess.
Yeah.
Like we have to remember there's so many people who don't feel that way, you know?
Yeah.
And I know, but it's a really strange time to be alive and to sort of see some forces building and to like not really know where that's headed. But it's true.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, like, those people have a really strong vision of the future, you know, like the people on the right wing, like they were like, for example, with abortion, like they had that goal, like a complete ban in mind. That's what they're going for. And like, so we have to counter that with like vision for the future on this side too.
Yeah. So do you have any advice for anybody who's maybe coming up and wants to get into writing, or maybe there is someone who like has that idea that they've been sitting on forever and they're now in their middle aged and they want to finally write their novel? Do you have any advice for those folks?
Yeah. I mean, there are a lot of people like that, I think. And I mean, my advice to any writer ever is to read a lot. I really have seen that in my work as an editor, and I've worked with students, and you can really like even tell almost within a paragraph who's a real reader and who's not. So that's like my biggest advice. And then I guess like I was talking about that feeling of like having an apprenticeship and just taking some time, or like my recent experience of realizing that I had to slow way down in order to finish my novel. I think we live in a world where like there was so much emphasis on productivity and on finishing something and the creative process. Like one of my friends said, it's more like a plant growing. It's like you have some control. Like you got to plant the seeds and you got to be there to water every day. You got to show up, but like you don't really fully have control on how fast that plant grows. So my advice would be to like put the time in without putting too much pressure on yourself.
Yeah, that's great. Like give yourself that space. Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so my last question. What does making it mean to you now versus when you're younger? So what did success look like to you?
When I was younger, honestly, just getting published at all would have been success. I was, recently writing a novel has been interesting because I was a short story writer, which basically only other writers read short stories. And so writing a novel, I started to get these ideas in my mind, like I could make actual money off this book. Some people might actually read it and buy it, and maybe it'll get made into a movie, that kind of feeling. So I had a few years of these I guess they were like dreams, fantasies, that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And now that the book is actually coming out, my dream of success would be like for readers and the majority of reviewers, I wanted to like for people to really kind of understand or connect with it. That's kind of all that I want. I know it's a weird book. It's like a weird book that sounds super duper fun about Mars and reality TV. And then actually underneath it all is actually a book about grief and loss. So I hope that like the sort of the fun and humor of it connects, but also the deeper undercurrents too.
Yeah. Okay, so where can people follow you, buy your book, and when is it? I'm sure it's available for pre-order now. When does it come out?
It comes out June 13th, and it should be available like at any stores online. And I have a website. It's deborahwillis.ca, and through that, like you could connect with me on Instagram and supposedly Facebook. Like I'm supposedly on Facebook, but I'm so scared of it. So,
so maybe Instagram. Yeah. Okay. That's awesome. Well, yeah, everybody go out and buy Deborah's book. This has been so nice. I feel like I could talk to you forever. This has been really fun. Yeah. And I'm so glad Eric connected us. Eric, the great connector.
It's true. Yeah, it's been so nice to meet you, and all the best with your writing and your acting and parenting.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Same to you. Thank you all for listening to this week's episode. You can follow Deborah on Instagram at deborah.m.willis and check out her website, deborahwillis.ca. You can pre-order her book on Goodreads, which is also linked on her website. And remember, it's coming out on June 13th, so it's just around the corner. If you're enjoying the show, please don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe wherever you listen. And please share the show with your friends. Share it on Instagram. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that. Be sure to follow the show on Instagram at Making It After 40, the number 40, and to catch up on what I'm doing when I'm not podcasting, check out my Instagram at Lisa Rodriguez. Thank you all for listening and have an excellent week.